What's up, everybody? Thanks for joining me on these analysis. We're going to be checking out MSTR and Bitcoin today in this video. We're currently sitting at 283.84. Here on the weekly, we still have 18 hours left until we get a close. More than likely, I would imagine that we stay at least above or somewhere equal to this support zone. So maybe somewhere 272 or higher, I would imagine. I don't think we will close underneath it, but it is possible. That would be, we'd have to close 4% down. So we'd have to really repeat what we had today. A 4% day to the downside. Tomorrow would end up closing underneath the structure, which would then, as we talked about prior, open up the likelihood of us coming down to this next structure at 258. We've been speaking about this for some time now. We always talk about these horizontal levels of support and resistance. We said initially, as we broke underneath here, we got our close. We said retest now opens up the idea of us potentially falling to this level. We did not on that one. We ended up pushing back through, using it as support and making it to this next structure, finding resistance, chopping, falling back through, and then we said the exact same thing that we said over here. And this time it looks like it actually ended up happening. Remember, things aren't 100%. Doesn't always have to play out. But the likelihood shifts in a certain direction when certain things happen. Just like this time here, we closed underneath this horizontal structure. We came for a retest, which opens up the idea of us potentially falling to the next structure, ideally to this wick over here. And once we broke that, then our next target was this structure, and it looks like we pretty much made contact with it at around 281 or so, and now we're sitting at that structure. So we have pretty much the exact same thing that we always talk about. We're either going to find some kind of support or potentially pierce through. If we have another 4% day, unfortunately, I hope it doesn't happen, but if it falls through here, now we're looking at the same thing, retest, and continue down to this next structure. And this next structure is going to be a major level there. That's probably going to be one of the most powerful levels. And once you lose that, you have one last line in the sand anywhere around, it's a little hard to gauge, but I would say around here. That's going to be your last hope right there. Potentially done for the cycle if we lose this structure. This is going to pretty much be, this is going to be bad, but this would be the ultimate loss right there. And once you lose there, you're potentially coming down to this next structure over here at these wicks somewhere in this ballpark. Remember, nothing's exact. Somewhere in that area would be your next level of support at 180 to around 170. So be aware of that. That's kind of the levels that I'm looking for if we were to lose this structure here. On the weekly SMAs, kind of have the same thing as before. We're holding well underneath the 50, but our 20 is starting to curl down and put some downward pressure towards the 50, and it might end up curling back under. And that's a very bearish sign, especially on the weekly. That's a very powerful time frame. And then on the daily, kind of in the same ballpark where the 20 is pushing down, our 50 has done exactly what we just talked about on the weekly. It's doing that. So you can see how the 20 is pushing down on the 50. Here on the daily, the 50 has done that over the 200. The 50 is pushed underneath the 200, and that's a signal for more downside pressure, and that's what we've been seeing. On the Bollinger Bands, we made it up to our blue band, the middle band, last week, and we found rejection off of that. We talked about that potentially being a level of support or resistance because that's what it is, and confluence with the structure, making it more than likely going to be some kind of resistance. And it looks like it fell through because you have this Bollinger Band along with this horizontal structure, and it proved to be a ceiling. And now we're hugging the bottom band to the downside here on the weekly. We'll see if we get a bounce or if we continue to hug it for a further move down. Now it looks like we are kind of getting the opposite of what we had over here, where we had confluence to the downside as resistance. this is looking like potential, at least short term, some kind of support, because you're going to have this Bollinger Band, the outer band, the bottom one, and confluence with this structure here at around 280 to 271, somewhere in that ballpark. And on the daily, the same concept. We're literally in the same spot, pretty far from our blue band. Our short-term rally indicator here on the 8-week EMA, you can see we've fallen right back underneath, and it looks like we could be continuing this initial move right here, and it was a fake out for a break to the upside, and then we just continued on down. And on the daily, kind of in the same ballpark, where we're just trending downward, holding underneath our 8-day moving average, and it's just building momentum to the downside. Volume has been sitting at around 13.8. Last day was 10. The day before that, 11.4, 11.5, 13. So we're kind of hovering in the same ballpark, around that 10 to 14 million range. Seems pretty normal for MSTR at this point. Weekly RSI is just trending down more and more. Lower highs, lower lows, just pushing down lower. A lot of momentum to the downside. Same thing here on the daily. Looks like we are at a key level of support when you take a look here at around 32. Currently sitting at around 34. We have found support off of this level prior. We'll see if this can serve as a floor, or if we end up flipping this and using this as a ceiling to continue on down. Momentum on the MACD is just absolutely pushing down further, more and more. It's building momentum, and we just have entered bearish territory once again. So it looks like this could be a continuation down, at least temporarily for the short term. And the daily, we've stayed in bearish territory this entire time. We were creating higher highs and higher lows. It looks like we just broke our trend that we had. That strength that we saw pushing to the upside has now failed. So we'll see if we get a retest of it, or we just continue this momentum to the downside. It was looking good after we had the red flip, and then we had a nice little green hill. But once we saw this red candle here and the momentum start to shift downward, that was kind of that leading indicator, letting us know that this thing could be starting to lose momentum to the upside. And now you can see that we actually broke the structure that we had, where we were building higher highs and higher lows since around September. And there was some kind of divergence where it was kind of trending sideways, and this was building momentum, so it was looking pretty solid, and it's just completely lost that. So it looks like the momentum has just overtaken it to the downside. Now I'm going to put MSTR against Bitcoin so we can see what has been happening in terms of like performance and deviation. In terms of deviation, really, you can see how MSTR had this crazy outperformance, and then ever since it's kind of just been brutally beat down. These small downturns for Bitcoin have been major sell-offs for MSTR, and then we had a nice spike. MSTR started to pump, and then it has fallen off of a cliff, and Bitcoin really just started the beginning of a double top when you just take a look at this little piece here, and MSTR is just bleeding out completely. But at the same time, it looks like MSTR is creating a major double top versus what Bitcoin's doing. You can kind of see the divergence as well. So you can see that Bitcoin's major, when you look at these two peaks, we're comparing this and this to this and this. You can see that they're pushing higher, a lot higher at a steeper pace. And this one was more flat. Like it's still pushing up higher, but you can see the different angles. Let me take this off here. You can see those two different angles. Let me move that back to where I had it. You can see how steep that angle is versus how steep this angle is. This is much more flat compared to this one. And then, of course, the major sell-off on MSTR. When we take a look at Bitcoin, you can see that we had that rejection off of this key level. It has served as rejection multiple times already, so we're not surprised to see it. And we also came to that conclusion early on in the month when we saw that this candle had no wick underneath it. and a major move to the upside, really with no momentum prior to that. So it was a little odd. And then we ended up wicking back and pushing back down. And for the weekly, we were speaking of a potential wick up and then a candle or a wick fill here. But it looks like we just got the wick fill with no wick up top. So we did get the wick fill, which was the most important thing. I just thought it would push up a little bit before filling the wick, but it looked like it just went straight to filling that wick. But now we are at a key level of support at this 109 to around 106 level. This was the previous high over here where we found resistance, and we've been using it as a floor prior. So we'll see if we can hold that. If we do fall underneath it, now we're going to start to look at if we hold and retest following this week, then we're looking at a retest and potentially a move down to this structure, or at least to one of these smaller, more minor levels like one of these over here. So be aware of that. Ideally, we just want to hold this 109 level. That's going to be the best case scenario. So we stay playing within this range up here, and then we play with the minor levels above this major level right here. SMAs, we are back underneath our 20 week, which is not the best sign. We were holding pretty well above it. We even wicked off of it, so it was looking pretty promising. And on the daily, we're actually at the 200, so we definitely want to hold that because the 200 day is a major support level. As you can see, we don't lose the 200 very, very often, and when we do, they're usually pretty decent drawdowns. And then when we recover above it, we usually get nice moves. But you can see that we spend most of our time above the 200 day. So we're hoping that we can continue to hold that level. But we have seen those periods where we have fallen underneath it. So hopefully that isn't this time right now, but it looks like it could be. But at the end of the day, we could just find a support level off of here and continue up because it is in confluence with this key structure right here. In terms of global liquidity, it looks like we pushed up higher, and now it looks like we're finding some kind of double top. We'll see if this is an actual top, or at least a short-term top, and then a continuation, or if this is getting closer to the end of this M2 money supply cycle. But right now, it looks like we still could be getting a move higher unless we already saw that nice spike up to that 125 mark that we saw a few weeks back. MSTR divided by IBIT, really not much to say here. This thing's absolutely just getting hammered day after day, and it's continuing the trend that we already spoke about. We're hugging this downward sloping trend line, and it's just getting more aggressive to the downside. I'm not even going to pull up the SMAs because they're all just going to be pointing to the downside. The EMAs are all going to be trending to the downside. Everything's just going to be bearish on this chart overall. Tether dominance, looks like we're getting another spike. Absolutely insane, up to 4.97. That's why we're seeing this major downturn. So now that we're in this range, we're hoping for some kind of resistance here and a nice red engulfing candle to replace this candle and make it turn into a nice wick on the monthly and a continuation down. We still have 2 days and 23 hours. We just want to get a close back underneath 467 and start to continue back down. But we were speaking of that potential ascending triangle, and maybe that's the breakout that we were talking about. As we were climbing and getting tighter and tighter, we broke out, used it as support, and now we just absolutely ripped even higher, how typical ascending triangles tend to do. And yeah, it has proven to bring some downside for Bitcoin as we saw the ascending triangle forming. Said it was possible, of course wasn't sure. And on the monthly, we still have 14 days left. So hopefully this is just a major wick, and then we can see a nice fall to the downside. If we were to take a fib from this major top over here, this one over here to this bottom, you can actually see that we're at a major golden zone for a continuation to the downside right here. It's 0.5 of 618. That's exactly where we just wicked off of. This major zone right here. That's a golden zone. So we pushed back up. Like I said, I always talk about these golden zones because they're magnets for price. So it pushed all the way down. You're attracted to this magnet, the 0.5 of 618, found rejection, hopefully continues on down. And this is an actual continuation to the downside, which would then bring a spike for Bitcoin. So that's why I like these golden zones. They're always relevant in some kind of way. In terms of the SMA, we are using the 20 and 50 as a level of support, unfortunately. And here on the daily, we're using the 200 as a trampoline and continued higher. Make sure you guys drop a like and subscribe if you enjoy content like this. I'll see you guys in the next one.